We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! I'm Yuruzi and this is part 11 of What If Naruto Sends Himself Back in Time to Fix His Mistakes. Naruto, at 26, has lived through 10 years of war. At the end, with nothing left to call home, he sends himself back to the beginning, to the day of his younger self's graduation, in an attempt to change it all. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 11, Memory of the King. Asuma-sensei, are you sure that Haruki is still coming? Ino asked from her position upside down on a branch of one of the taller trees at the edge of the clearing. Team 10 had met up at the flower shop like they usually did before the start of every day. When the time came to leave for the training ground though and the redhead still hadn't arrived, they began to get concerned. Asuma assured them that Haruki had likely just gotten held up at the Hokage Tower and would be along shortly. When they arrived at their training ground, he got each of them started on their warm-up, but now he was running out of ways to stall. Yes, Ino. The bearded Jonin replied, I spoke with him last night, remember? He had every intention of being here, and he's not a man to break his word lightly. He was likely caught in his other duties or called away on a mission. Still, sensei. He's never been late. And from what Naruto tells me, he hates being late. He really gives Kakashi-sensei a hard time about it. The Nara hanging beside Ino pointed out. In any case, people are not perfect, and if he can't make it this time, we will make the most of our training time regardless and go ask him about it later, Asuma replied after taking a long drag of his cigarette before flicking it on the ground and stepping on it. Privately in his own mind, Asuma could not help but echo the same concern his students had. Not that he knew the full extent of Haruki's character, but from what he did know, the man was not one to let Kakashi's tardiness rub off on him. And it seemed, for whatever reason, that the training of his students and their friends was something of a priority to him. So then why wasn't he there at the meeting time? He looked up at the sky. It must be approaching 11 now, he thought. Not too long ago these three would be moaning as they drugged themselves to the flower shop around this time. If Haruki hadn't gotten some motivation in them. Just then a cold shiver went down his spine as the smoker realized what the actual problem was. Shit! He explained as the implications started to sink in. He had forgotten to tell Haruki about the time change. In the next moment he heard a voice right behind him chuckle darkly, oh, you have no idea. An instinctual shunshin kept Asuma from being cleaved in two. Reappearing on the other side of the clearing in a cold sweat, blades out, Asuma tried to placate the clearly enraged redhead that stepped into the clearing and started striding across the grass toward him. Now Haruki, wait just a minute, I can explain. He started before he was cut off by a sudden onslaught from the redhead who appeared mid-swing, blade coated in chakra. It took all of his concentration to parry the blows and keep his footing. Asuma, headless to the fact that his students hadn't stopped training, too shocked to react, was driven back to where Haruki had started. Weaving between the blurred blade that whirled almost silently through the air, Asuma ducked and dodged while the redhead seemingly effortlessly slashed and stabbed at the Jonin. Back flipping away from an upward slash, Asuma didn't see the smirk on the redhead's face until it was too late. Suddenly feeling a presence behind him, Asuma turned to see a familiar large fist inches from impact. He braced himself as the impact launched him all the way across the clearing into the base of the tree that Shikamaru and Ino were using to train. The impact was enough of a shake to break Ino's connection since her concentration was already divided. With a shout of surprise she began to fall even as Shikamaru tried to catch her. Luckily she fell right into the waiting arms of their sensei's attacker. Are you alright, Ino? Haruki asked with concern, realizing that he had caught her bridal style and that she was much closer and more vulnerable to the powerful Jonin than she ever had been before she began to blush. YYSS ha, Haruki-sensei. Quickly she squirmed out of his arms even as he set her down gently. His face appearing neutrally kind with perhaps a bit of discomfort. Hearing a groan over to the side, they turned to see Asuma still laying on the back, while Shikamaru hopped down to join the group. I don't want to hear it, Asuma. You had every opportunity to tell me the meeting time had changed yesterday and you didn't. Shikamaru-kun, you are now in charge of making sure I'm informed. The redhead said callously as his turned to the spiky-haired genin. Shikamaru just nodded, feeling a mixture of annoyance and nervousness. The last thing he wanted was the redhead to turn his temper toward him. Turning to Choji after stowing his blade, Haruki smiled broadly and gave the genin a thumbs up. Good job, Choji. That was a solid hit. You're significantly better at suppressing your chakra. Excellent teamwork too. The genin beamed at the praise as his actual sensei began to sit up while internally noted how quickly the redhead's mood shifted. You were pretty good yourself, sensei. It didn't seem like you were trying all that much. Not really, but your sensei was caught by surprise, which gave me the advantage, and I didn't have to beat him. I just had to provide you the opportunity to score a hit. A far easier task. This just shows you that proper planning can take down any opponent no matter the strength. A kunai will kill a kage same as it would a civilian. Haruki answered as he scratched the back of his hand. Truth be told, if he wanted to he could probably take Asuma down, but not nearly as easily as he had just bested the man. Maybe the genin were not the only ones needing some extra training. He shook himself inwardly as he reminded himself they were not yet at war. But when did you have time to plan, anyway? Ino questioned, trying to figure out how the ambush had been set up in the first place. It was Shikamaru that answered though. While Choji was on his run, Haruki-sensei probably met up with him and planned the whole thing. Haruki smirked at the Nara. Let this be a lesson to you that pranks will not go without a bit of revenge. And you won't know what hit you when it happens. Right, Asuma? The redhead side-eyed the bearded jonin, gaining a sadistic grin. The man gave an irritated huff as he rubbed his head but otherwise stayed quiet. So what are we doing today, sensei? You're not going to give us another insane mission, are you? The blonde asked with not so subtly hesitation. While ultimately the mission had been worth it, none of the genin were eager to repeat it. Ma. You all handled the last one I gave you fairly well. But don't worry, we aren't doing anything like that right now. The redhead finished with a small smirk. There was a pronounced shift in posture at that news and the three relaxed more than a bit relieved. No, in fact I brought presents for you guys. Rewards for taking your training seriously and training aids to keep you from falling behind the other teams. Haruki then produced 3 scrolls from his jacket and tossed one to each genin. Each was sealed with their respective clan insignia. It appears that we arrived just in time, a voice called from the edge of the clearing, turning the group glance at 3 figures coming out of the brush. That is, if you don't mind us watching, Haruki, said Choza Akimichi as he strode out with Inochi and Shikaku to his left just a step behind. Haruki's eyes darted over to Asuma, who was still sitting on the ground. Asuma quickly put his hands up as if to placate the coming anger of the redhead. He was just as surprised as Haruki was to see them here. Haruki's eyes scanned the faces of the 3 genin as they greeted their approaching parents, though he kept his face neutral. They didn't seem to be expecting them either. Raising an eyebrow at Shikaku as they finally arrived with the group, Haruki turned his unspoken question to the Nara even as he replied, "That's fine, Choza. I don't mind. We were just curious to see their growth for ourselves. Inochi was very impressed with your methods the other day, and after what you told me yesterday, we thought it might be helpful to have a grasp of their training with you in order to better support them. We were going to come by during the meat of the training, but due to your delay now we get to see the whole thing," Shikaku explained with a knowing smirk. At the mention of the former interrogator, Haruki frowned but did not comment, instead deciding to dutifully ignore the man's presence while trying not to be obvious about it. Nodding, the redhead replied unfazed, "Well, like I said, I don't mind, but this first part may be boring." He shrugged and turned to the 3 genin watching the exchange. "After all, I do owe Shikamaru-kun a shogi game." Shikamaru perked up at the mention of shogi and a smile threatened to part on his face. Turning back fully to the genin, Haruki acted as if their parents weren't standing 10 feet away looking on. "Open them," he said to them, smiling. Each genin unrolled their scroll only to realize they were sealing scrolls. Quickly unsealing the contents, each one trying to guess what was inside. Their fathers didn't hold back their curiosity as they looked on. In front of Shikamaru there appeared a receipt, a sealed department application, a shogi board for scrolls, and a thin paper square. In Choji's scroll appeared a set of weights, a metal warhammer, a small book, a thin piece of paper, and 4 other scrolls. In Ino's scroll appeared a large set of books, a thin piece of paper, a green kunoichi combat dress, and 6 other scrolls. "Now Shikamaru-kun, I would like you to set up the board please while I go over the others' gifts," the redhead said as he sat down in the grass and crossed his legs. The other 2 quickly gravitated to their own gifts. Ino naturally picked up the garment and was examining it closely. She let out a breath as the dress began to change color where she touched it to red. She was so surprised she nearly dropped it. Her gasp was enough to grab the attention of a very confused shogi who had been flipping through what appeared to be a blank notebook. The collection of fathers off to the side were trying to keep from rushing the process, wanting to understand what the enigmatic jonin had just placed in front of their children. Thanks to Shikaku, they had had some idea as to what each of their children would be receiving for their training. Perusing the present materials proved that their thoughts were not far off. The unique gifts, however, were still perplexing and in Inochi's case slightly discomforting. Why did Haruki give my daughter a dress? He thought with slight apprehension. Asuma also was surprised by what appeared. He knew the other teams had started elemental training, and if he was honest, he was uncertain his students were ready. For now though, he would follow the redhead's lead. As if reading the man's mind, Haruki addressed the flabbergasted girl first. Ino, while I show Choji how his works, why don't you go into the woods and change and try that dress on? I'll explain when you come back. The blonde nodded, still looking at the dress before rushing off into the woods to be away from prying eyes. Focusing back on the Akimichi, Haruki almost laughed at the expression of concentration on Choji's face as he examined the book. Choji flipped to the last page. He paused and waited as the genin complied. Now place a finger on each of the squares on that page and channel chakra into it like you were climbing a tree. Immediately after he started channeling chakra into the page, letters started appearing on the page. Your book is now unlocked. To lock it back, just do the same thing you just did. The readhead said with a small smile as Shikamaru finished setting up one side of the board. Inside the book are all the recipes and properties of different ingredients I could think of, with room for you to add more. As you learn more, you can add to the contents. Now, flip to the back again. Haruki clarified as he pulled out ink and a brush from his pack. Choji did so, tearing his eyes away from all the information inside. Haruki then handed him the brush and ink. Right, fever reducer, then channel chakra into those square just like you did the first time, only keep it constant. After doing so, the ink faded into the page, then ink faded into view on the back side of the previous page. On this page there was an index of names and page numbers that all related to the words that Choji had written. Haruki-sensei, this looks like it will be very helpful, thank you. Choji said politely, but Haruki just smiled. It was clear that Choji didn't understand the full value of the resource he had just been given. How could he? He hadn't even been out of the village yet. His father, on the other hand, was gaping as he looked at the book with wonder. A resource like that would be invaluable to a ninja. The jonin present had never seen anything of its kind. Choza knew he would need to stress its importance to Choji. Oh, I wasn't quite done, Choji. Clear the page by just stopping your flow of chakra. Choji obeyed and they waited while the words quickly faded. Shikamaru had stopped setting up the board and had been looking on while his sensei and their parents look on over Choji's shoulder, stunned. Now right, Barbecue Choji's face split into a grin as he did what he was told. Without being prompted, he channeled chakra into the seal again and waited with anticipation as the words faded. On the other page, words once again faded into view, and it was a list of terms and page numbers associated with Barbecue. Choji teared up a bit as he looked up at his red-headed sensei, who just laughed. See, it's for fun too, so make the most out of it. The redhead said, giving him a thumbs up and a wink. He missed entirely the look Choza gave him. Whatever uncertainties he had about the man, Choza set them aside as he looked at his son and Haruki. There is no doubt this man cares for my son. I don't know why, but maybe it doesn't matter right now. I see why the others have had such a taking to him. Choji shook his head but didn't respond, not trusting his voice. Haruki continued, this book was crafted with complex fuinjutsu that were not easy to apply. Take good care of it. I will not be making you another. This is a precious resource for you to use and cherish. Make the most of it. When the time comes and you run out of room, come to me, show me what you have learned and how you have grown, then I will give you the key to make your own. Will you do that, Choji? Hi, sensei. Choji answered with such ferocious determination. Haruki pitied the person who so much as thought of touching that book. It honestly wasn't that hard to make, but it was very time-consuming, and he wasn't in the mood to even have a clone do that in the near future. The Choji he knew would always be hungry both for food and knowledge. It was his desire to learn all that he could that kept many shinobi alive during long stretches in the field. Haruki was confident this Choji would be no different. An informed Choji would become very effective at information gathering and resource management. He was instrumental to the medical corps. A special after Sakura was taken and Ino was forced to head both the medical force and what was left of their interrogation department, shaking away such thoughts mentally before he got lost in the memories. Haruki turned to the Nara that was sitting across from him. Shikamaru had stopped setting up the board and was looking over Choji's shoulder, eyes roving the pages with a far-off look, already coming up with uses for the gift his friend had been given. For a brief moment Haruki thought he caught a hint of jealousy as well. Haruki decided it was time to move on. Or at least he was, until a certain blonde emerged from the woods. Hey everyone. What do you think? Ino said as she approached the group. The dress that was once solid green now was a light pink. Wow Ino, you look great. Choji said, grinning at his teammate. Yeah, but wasn't the dress GRA? Shikamaru started before. In front of his eyes the dress started to change colors to a bright happy yellow as Ino smiled at Choji and strode forward more confidently than before. Haha, I'm glad you like it. Haruki said, looking at her and tilting his head slightly sideways and giving her a soft smile. Ino, once she reached them, did a spin to show off her new look while she was still grinning ear to ear. Ironically though, everyone's eyes were looking at the redhead, clearly wanting to know how such an item came to be and why. Well Ino, as I'm sure you've noticed, your dress changes color. He began, ignoring the others as he did for Choji. Yeah, at first it kind of freaked me out, but it's actually kind of cool. How did you get it to change with how I'm feeling? She said, even as the dress transformed to a pale purple. Well, that's not really how it works. The dress is made of special thread that is chakra conductive and highly sensitive to chakra. I then put a sealing matrix on the dress that activates when I comes into contact with enough chakra. This causes the color changing effect. He paused, gesturing in her general direction. Ino, you naturally have difficulty keeping your chakra frequency stable, that's why it appears to change with your emotions. This dress will help you train to recognize this and learn the refined control you need. Not to mention you'll be able to change your look as you wish without needing a henge. When you've mastered it, there is a surprise for you. When you can use a jutsu and the dress doesn't change colors, I'll show it to you. Ino looked at the dress with a mixture of emotions ranging from excitement to curiosity to nervousness, and this was reflected in a rapid shifting of colors. Immediately Ino took a breath and tried to center herself. The dress settled on yellow again. Haruki relaxed, looking back at the whole group. Each of your gifts will help you build on the control you gained last time we trained. Ino, yours help you with chakra regulation. You can practice matching different frequencies with different colors and holding it for different lengths of time. Choji, the more you use yours, the more you will learn and the larger your chakra reserves will grow. The more you empty your reserves, the more they will refill and push the boundaries of your network. And Shikamaru. He finished with a smirk, turning to the last member of Team 10 to address specifically. You are about to figure yours out. Sighing as the all eyes turned to him, the young Nara gestured at the incomplete board. I'm guessing this is why there aren't enough pieces to finish up the board. How troublesome. In front of them, the metal board had each of the pieces necessary to complete one side of the board, but left behind was only a king, 3 pawns, a knight, a bishop, a rook, and a gold general for the other side. Exactly. You see, the pieces on the board represent resources that you have at your disposal. The amount of resources you have compared to me are vastly different, so you start with less. As your skills improve, I will give you more pieces of the set. Until then, when we play, this will be what we have. That's so troublesome and hardly a fair game. The Nara grumbled, glaring at the board as if it would spontaneously generate the remaining pieces he needed. His teammates giggled a bit at his misfortune. I promised you a game. I never said anything about how or when, and I wasn't quite done. He countered with a shrug before sitting down and putting his hand on the board. The board is chakra conductive, so we can only move pieces using our chakra. For me, I use lightning chakra through the metal to magnetically move the pieces. For you, I would recommend using your shadow. Still want to play? To the surprise of the adults looking on, especially his father, Shikamaru didn't say no immediately. Starting with most of your own board gone was a disadvantage that was almost impossible to recover from, especially if your opponent actually knew what they were doing, which Haruki clearly did. Instead, the Nara just asked a question. So wait, if these pieces represent resources I have, what is each piece? I had hoped you would figure some of them out, but giving you a bit of help is probably fair. Haruki said neutrally with a small smile. You are the knight that can outmaneuver other pieces with your flexible thinking. Ino is your bishop who comes in from the wings with a fresh perspective and dynamic abilities, while Choji is your rook and your solid support. Asuma is your gold general, your limited baseline of support. The pawns each represent a vital skill of a shinobi. Currently you only are good enough to have earned 3, teamwork, chakra control, and strategic thinking. But hopeful with some training we can change that soon. Even as Haruki explained the purpose of each piece to them, the other jonin were all regarding him with blatant curiosity, though for different reasons. Shikaku was more subdued than the others because he knew who the Haruki really was, but it was because he knew who Haruki was that he was incredibly curious what had happened to turn the Naruto he knew into this man. He knew he had only scratched the surface, but the man clearly knew each of these genin well to have picked such perfect motivators for them. Shikamaru already held great respect for the man, but his desire to prove his own mental ability would drive him to actually follow the man. Shikaku smiled to himself. The greatest part of all is how he fosters their will of fire. This time we will not fail. Inoichi was analyzing the jonin's every move. None of this made any sense to him. Haruki had obviously gone to great lengths to prepare these gifts and training materials. It was a testament to the man's skill that they were made at all, but they already had proof of the extent of his skills in the art. The question that kept surfacing in the Yamanaka clan head's mind was, why? The man had definite baggage, including potential struggles with trauma. Inoichi hadn't witnessed any incidents, but all the factors were there. Whatever this knew was sensitive enough to have the Hokage forbids any attempts at a mind healer gaining access, and Haruki himself reacted very poorly to the idea. And despite coping with whatever burdened his condition, as well as his mount responsibilities, the man was dedicating time and resources to personally develop his daughter and her friends. Even after examining all he knew or could conclude about the mysterious man, Inoichi still couldn't answer that nagging question. Choza, however, was watching Shikaku out of the corner of his eye. It had been the Nara's suggestion rather suddenly this morning to witness their kids' training session. They had readily again since they knew it was Haruki's day with them, and Choza was curious to see the man's methods for himself. He had suspected then, but his reaction proved in Choza's mind that the Jonin commander had figured out what was going on. The fact though that he wouldn't just tell them conveyed all he needed to know about the situation. Choza hoped that he would be able to figure out what Shikaku wanted him to see. It seemed Inoichi was too busy scrutinizing the enigma Haruki was to notice Shikaku's moves. Perhaps that is for the best at the moment though, the Akimichi thought. The fathers were each roused from their musing when Shikamaru asked Haruki about the last piece on the board. But Haruki-sensei, what about the king? Immediately Shikaku felt Asuma tense a bit as he looked at the red head. It was true that Haruki had left that piece unspecified, but Shikaku thought that had been intentional. Knowing Asuma's recent history, the whole subject probably brought bad memories to the surface. There is little doubt the man was probably wanting to hear the redhead's answer. He was likely already uncomfortable at the gold general comment. Haruki, fully aware that the eyes of the others, particularly Asuma's, were boring into him, calmly tilted his head in thought as he leaned back on his hands. The king, huh? Who do you think the king is? That's easy, it's the daimyo. Choji answered without a second thought. No baka, the king is the Hokage. Ino immediately responded before anyone had a chance to speak, though from the look of things Haruki made no effort to reply. That's just the leader of the village, the daimyo is the leader of the country. Choji countered in an annoyed huff. Ino's brash attitude really annoyed him sometimes. Actually, if this were a mission, the king would be the client. After all, the point of shogi is to protect the king, and what Hokage needs protecting. We protect clients on missions. Shikamaru cut in before things could escalate while he tried to reason out the right answer. Last thing he wanted was Ino screeching in his ear about his present. That's why I'm saying it's the daimyo. Choji answered, slightly frustrated still with Ino's attitude. Are you even listening? Ino shouted back, but was interrupted by Shikamaru. Haruki-sensei, which of us is right? He asked, silently pleading that he would settle the matter before Ino shrieked any further. Yeah, Haruki-sensei, tell us. Ino added while Choji nodded as well. That's a good question. And each of you raised good points. I suppose it is difficult to say. This reminds me of a part in my favorite book. Here, I'll read it to you. It's based on an old legend that I believe is true. With that, the redhead pulled out from his pack a book. Maybe Kakashi was rubbing off on him after all if he was starting to actually carry a book around with him. As he flipped the book open to find the pages he wanted to read, the others sat down and got comfortable, though the genin appeared to be trying very hard not to seem incredibly bored at the prospect of being read to like young children. There were once 3 kings who argue about this very question a long time ago. Powerful individuals with abilities and strength far exceed any ninja, they were in a war against each other for the prize of any wish they wanted granted. No one knows how, but the 3 agreed that the wish should go to the most worthy. They thought that if they could decide on who, that there would be no more need to fight each other. Haruki summarized as he finally found the page. And so they held a banquet where each that claimed the title of king tried to justify why they were the worthiest and why they were the true king. The first king, King Gilgamesh, was a very wealthy and powerful man whose hoard of riches had long surpassed his knowledge. He believed that a true king is one with complete dominion over all within his realm. All property is his, all of his subjects only live to serve him and are unequivocally beneath him, although that doesn't mean he believes in abusing them. The absolute rule of his law guides all his actions. He places himself before his nation and the people, and he has neither the curiosity nor desire to conquer, possibly because he had too much in the beginning. He takes the time to enjoy himself, mastering every treasure and every pleasure. With conviction to treat good and evil equally, he has no need for other ideologies and ways of life when the absolute basis is himself. He was once quoted saying, to a king, his country is nothing more than his property. If a king cannot control his property, then his people no longer need someone as powerful as a king, and it is because of this, King Arturia, that you woke up to find that your country had turned on you. Here Haruki paused and explained that King Arturia was one of the 3 kings at the summit. He noticed that the students at least had begun to be pulled into the story even as he summarized parts to get to what he really wanted to share. Haruki smiled to himself, flaws aside, his sensei really was a good writer. He had no wish of his own but to deny others access to the treasure that could grant the wish. He saw it as a theft of what is rightfully his. Because to King Gilgamesh, all treasures were his. The second king, King Iskandar, realizing that there was no compromising the declaration of the first, toasted in his honor and declared he would take pleasure in the coming fight where he intended to claim the artifact for himself in any way by right of conquest. The third king, King Arturia, then having heard the answer of the first and the conclusion of the second, asks a question of Iskandar. After acknowledging that the rightful ownership of the artifact belonged to another and admitting that he was therefore, logically, not as worthy, why would he still seek it? What was so important to him that he would continue to strive for the artifact? Iskandar replied, after drinking from his cup, that he wished for the power he needed to continue his conquest of other nations, for his body was failing him despite the battle prowess he still possessed. He wouldn't dare leave the conquering to some mere object. Arturia was very displeased with his answer and stated as much. She claimed that was not how a king should behave. Intrigued and slightly amused, Iskandar asked what she would ask of the artifact if she should win it. With confidence she replied that she would use the overwhelming power of the wish-granting device to avert the destruction of a portion of her kingdom that had fallen to a fruitless civil war, leaving it vulnerable to its neighbors. Iskandar, confused by this, asks her to clarify that she would change fate and that it was during her reign that this nation, her homeland, was conquered and failed. Arturia affirms this desire and says that she is the only one to blame for this outcome and thus why she regrets it. Her response causes Gilgamesh to lose himself in laughter, which she does not understand. He replies to her questioning, saying he is surprised she can claim the title of king and feel regret at all. In anger she rises to defend herself. Her beloved country for which she dedicated her whole life to was destroyed. Why is my sadness about that strange, she says. Haruki starts quoting from the book instead of summarizing. By this point even the adults are absorbed into the story. Moving on, Haruki reads the book aloud. Laughing even harder, the first king says to the second, "Do you hear that? Her beloved country for which she dedicated her whole life, haha." Gilgamesh snickers mockingly to the Iskandar. "Do you hear that drivel? Do you hear what that little girl that calls herself a king had to say?" She replies in confusion and rage, "Why is that humorous to you? For their country's prosperity a true king should be willing to make any sacrifice." But before she could continue, Iskandar, who had been looking on silently for the time being, interrupted her. "You are wrong. The king does not devote himself, it is the nation and the people that must devote themselves to the king. You have reversed the concept. Those are words of a brutal tyrant." She answers accusingly. "Just so," Iskandar continues to answer calmly. "We are heroes because we are tyrants. But if a king regrets his rule or regret how his rule came to an end, he is nothing but a fool worse than the tyrant you disdain. Your empire is falling apart due to the deaths of your sons and the failing of your own body, and you claim to have no regrets? Arturia deflects accusingly. None at all. He replies calmly. Not if the end has come by my own decisions and the considerable sacrifices of my many retainers. Its destruction was inevitable. I shall mourn it and shed tears for it, but I will not regret it. Let alone undo it all. Such an act would be an insult to all those who fought and bled and died alongside me. It is only a warrior who can find glory in destruction, worthless as a king who fails to protect the weak. A just rule guided by just laws. Those are the true duties of a king. Arturia rebuttals. So you, the king of your realm, are a slave to what is right? Iskandar answered in shock. I am. She answered solemnly, kings are martyrs to their ideals. That is not the way a person should live. He mutters. If I am to rule as a king, I should not expect to live as a person. You seek the artifact merely for your own benefit, and as such you could never understand that. You who became a ruler only to satisfy your endless greed. She finished with a scoff of disgust, then quickly takes a step back as the second king yells in response. A king without greed is worse than a figurehead. Seeing her apprehension, he sighs and relaxes again, though his previous jovial attitude is long gone. You must be regarded by your people as something akin to the purest of saints. A proud and noble figure at the very least, but who can truly admire the rough and thorny path a martyr must follow in life? Who actually wishes for such an ending? Stunned into silence, Arturia just stands as Iskandar continues. A king must be greedier than any other. He must laugh more loudly and rage for much longer and embody the very extreme of all things good and evil. That's why his followers envy his very existence and adore him, and why the flames of aspiration, to be just as the king is, burn in his people. Proud king of chivalry, the righteousness and ideals you embraced may have saved your people, once. However, surely you know what became of those saved by you, who were left to fend for themselves. He finished with a grim face. What are you saying? She replied in almost a whisper. Haruki looked around as he spoke and took in the wide-eyed and thoughtful looks on each person's face. Without a doubt each was wrestling with what he was reading. Some trying to understand and make sense of it, others understood but were trying to filter what they had heard through their own thoughts. He was sure that the older members present understood the symbolism in the work. Time would tell how they would react, but in the end the story wasn't really for them. You may indeed have saved them, but you never lead them. You never showed them all what a king should really be. You abandoned your men when they lost their way. Then, alone and untroubled by that fact, you went off to chase your own pretty little ideals to the end. Thus you are no true king. You spent your life enraptured in a false idol of the humble king that always serves others. You're just a little girl. Their dinner continued in silence until the three kings prepared to leave where they had met. The first king sat smug the entire time, amused at the anguish on Arturia's face as she wrestled with the second's accusations. As Iskandar stood to take his leave, he presented them one final question. Does the king always stand alone? Arturia answered him subdued but with certainty, saying, the king must indeed be alone. Always. Iskandar chuckled lightly to himself as he stood to leave. No. You obviously don't understand. Little girl, you must wake from your sad dream and see the truth. If you don't, you'll someday lose that modicum of pride that you retain. The dream of a king that you spoke of earlier is a curse and a burden that blinds and cripples you. And with that he left. Standing to follow him out, Gilgamesh turns to the third and says, pay that bias mongrel no heed. You are correct to follow the path you believe in. Your agonizing pain and terrible sorrow as you bear a burden of kingship that is too heavy a weight for any, is quite a splendid and marvelous thing to look upon. And so he left with a laugh over his shoulder, leaving the bitter king of knights to her own reflection on what the others had said. Suddenly Haruki snapped the book closed, breaking the spell over the clearing. What happened next? Who won the contest? How did they decide? Did they get their wish? Don't stop there, Haruki-sensei. All three genin immediately bombarded the redhead with questions. Ino even stood up in exasperation, her dress turning a red-orange color. Haha, I can tell you more of the story another day. For now, I want you to think on what each king said, and then when you feel you have an answer, tell me who is the real king. He laughed as he put the book away, while all who heard him stared off in thought. Ignoring this, Haruki instructs each genin to pick up the thin piece of paper. Now on to actual training. X.X.X. Asuma didn't know what to think. Just when he thought he had figured the redhead out, The man had to go and casually throw a philosophical paper bomb in his head and then not talk about it. When Haruki had first pulled the book out, the bearded jonin had been curious about what he would say but confident in his own answer to the question. But then the redhead began reading. Not only was the story entertaining, but it was easy to pick up on the meaning underneath each of the three kings. Even if the genin were not mature enough yet to see it, Haruki had shaken Asuma and, from the looks of things, the other three adults present with the challenge the story raised. And if he was honest with himself, he found that he immediately wanted to discuss the matter further even when the man decided to start their actual training. Asuma had been through 2 cigarettes since the story finished, and it had only been 10 minutes, just to calm his nerves. The three kings each represented actual positions in the world. The first king, Gilgamesh, represented how most daimyo behaved. The daimyo had existed for as long as there have been nations. Families of high influence that lived in a world set apart from the average person. Many, having made fortunes years in the past, now owned most of the land within their respective nations or critical business to their region of influence. This hoarding of money and valuables fueled their secluded and privileged lifestyle and often gave them power over individuals. It was common then for those that grew in such environments to view themselves as superior and often snobbishly so. And there is some measure of credence to their point of view. The nation doesn't exist without the daimyo. Their wealth or business controls the flow of the economy for all that dwell within. It is because of this wealth that ninja villages even came to be. Almost every village, and certainly the larger ones, are subsidized by the ruling lord of their land. They are symbols of might and a powerful fighting force that can counter forces much larger than them. Yet despite a village's considerably larger fighting power, they are still dependent on the daimyo. Sunigakure is learning that firsthand if the rumors circling lately are any indication. Konoha is fortunate to have a rather reasonable lord ruling Hai no Kuni, but that doesn't change the fact that the old man still answers to him. The second king represented the Hokage or some other village leader. A Kage's word was law in most instances. Not only was the ruling Kage typically the most powerful ninja in the village, but was also the example that every ninja in the village looked up to. This was especially true in Konoha. The Hokage was the defender of the will of fire, and while he expected absolute obedience from those under him, he also cared for them. The ninja of the village in turn defend the Hokage even as he stands both above everyone and between them and the enemies that would destroy the village if they could. Regardless of their personal prowess, what sets Kage apart is not only their authority but also their ability to inspire and empower those beneath them. A Kage is often called to make difficult decisions. Decisions that oftentimes do not allow them to keep their own morals intact but put the village first. They don't have time for regrets and second-guessing. The final king represented the common people, whether that be the client on a mission or the ninja underneath a Kage's authority that are expected to lay down their lives in defense of the village. The ninja in Konoha hold to the will of fire. The idea that everyone in the village is part of one big family that each member protects. Those a part of it now and those to come. And for the longest time this was the group that Asuma had placed as the true king. The future generation, what he was fighting to protect. But that story had raised some valid points. Why did Haruki have to stop there, he thought with a slight whine. Asuma had always seen himself as the sacrificial pawn. Only important enough to give up his life in preservation of the next generation. You may indeed have saved them, but you never lead them. You never showed them all what a king should really be. You abandoned your men when they lost their way. Then alone and untroubled by that fact you went off to chase your own pretty little ideals to the end. Thus you are no true king. You spent your life enraptured in a false idol of the humble king that always serves others. Even now the words rang in his head. What was he living for? For his own death. Shaking his head, Asuma decided that for now he would focus on the training. Maybe his dad would have some thoughts. Asuma had been too engrossed in his own thoughts he almost missed his team use their chakra paper slips. They had moved over to sit in the shade on the edge of the clearing. Haruki just finished explaining them and each genin began channeling chakra. Haruki glanced over as Asuma stepped closer. It seems whatever contemplative state he was put in had passed. About time. Haruki glanced at him with a slightly accusing side eye. About time you rejoined us. Were you planning on shrugging your students off on me again today? Asuma rolled his eyes in response but was cut off from responding as Ino gave a shout of surprise. Turning to the platinum blonde, everyone saw that her paper had burst into flames at the edges before she dropped it. Her dress had changed to a light orange but she didn't appear to be hurt. "Congratulations, Ino. Your sensei will be able to help you more than I could. Fire jutsu and I don't get along well," Haruki said nonchalantly with a smile, tilting his head to the side. Next to her, Shikamaru and Choji finished channeling chakra into paper. Immediately Shikamaru's contorted violently and crinkled into as much of a ball as it could in between his hand. Choji's started to crumble from the center before the edges burned away. Asuma watched the paper react and couldn't keep the surprise off his face. Ino's affinity wasn't all that surprising. Fire was the most common affinity in Hai no Kuni and the Yamanaka clan had no shortage of Katan Jutsu users. A Nara with a lightning affinity, and if the paper's reaction was any indication, a really strong one at that, was a different story. Wind and earth jutsu might be beyond him without a great deal of effort, which when speaking about a Nara usually settled the matter. A Nara that had something different from water or fire was unheard of, at least when considering natural affinities. Considering Choji, his result was almost as shocking. The Akimichi were known for having either a natural fire or a natural earth affinity, but being born with two natural affinities was very uncommon even in the clan. Asuma glanced over at the fathers watching on. Choza had a large grin on his face as he ruffled Choji's hair and congratulated him. Shikaka didn't look fazed by the revelation, though he had a distant look on his face as he regarded his son as if he was trying to solve a puzzle but didn't have all the pieces. Likely he already knew Shikamaru's affinity if he wasn't shocked, which is odd since Shikamaru had not ever mentioned being tested before. Glancing at Inoichi, Asuma realized the man wasn't even looking at Ino. Instead he had his eyes fixed on the red head. Though his exterior was calm, his eyes held an intensity that Asuma had not seen before in the clan head. Following the man's gaze, he looked at the red head while the man interacted with his genin, chatting about their results. He vaguely perceived the man mention the results of some of the other teams. Apparently the Nara had a stronger affinity to lightning than Sasuke did, despite Ino's very vocal doubts that the Nara didn't appreciate. And that's when he noticed. Haruki was not surprised at all. There was no indication anywhere on the red head that the results were unexpected, and there should have been. Asuma cut his eyes back over to Inoichi and found the man's eyes looking back in his own. Something passed between the two and Inoichi just nodded. So he noticed too. Shaking his head ever so slightly at the Yamanaka, the blonde blinked and went back to watching the genin. Asuma wanted to wait and watch where things went. Only the most powerful of sensors could passively sense the affinities of another person unaided. The ability, while possible, was so rare he hadn't heard of a specific person who actually had it. He didn't actually know of anyone in history besides the first Hokage that had that ability in Nanoha. But if the man didn't sense it, how else could he have known? Now that that's out of the way, let me tell you guys about the training supports I included. I will go into more detail with each of you individual when we begin training. Haruki said, gesturing toward the remaining scrolls and things lying around where the genin were sitting with his feet. Ino, your chakra reserves put you in a unique position to learn chakra control very easily. You are like Sakura in that, in fact. I think both of you have the talent needed to be a medical ninja, and so just like I did for her, I gave you the same set of entry-level medical ninjutsu theory and anatomy. However, while you have greater endurance than Sakura, her control is still better than yours because of her ability to regulate different frequencies. To help you catch up, I have included 2 scrolls on advanced chakra control exercises. One of them requires you to hold a leaf to your forehead like in the academy, but then to move it along your body using only your chakra. When you can do this while performing other tasks, you will have mastered the exercise. The second is the basics of water walking. This is like the tree climbing exercise, but instead of using the same frequency and amount of chakra to climb, you have to change and adjust based on the movement of the water. When you have mastered both of those, I will arrange for you first medical ninjutsu training session if you are still interested. Haruki paused to let her soak in the information while pointing to the different scrolls. Truth be told, Sakura was always better at things that require supreme chakra control, but that didn't mean Ino couldn't get close if she put in the effort. Ino hadn't reacted well at first to hearing that Sakura was better than her. The dress had changed to a dark red as Ino's brow furrowed. She did adopt a determined expression as he finished explaining the exercises, however, which was a good sign. Continuing, Haruki gestured to the remaining scrolls. To be honest, Ino, if you were put in a straight-up fight, you would more than likely lose. From what I know, you are only capable of using the standard academy jutsu and one from your family's arsenal. If an emergency were to happen and you were placed in combat even against relatively weak opponents, you would die. Haruki finished bluntly and even in his tone. He didn't bother looking at the others, knowing that her father likely was not pleased with what he said despite it being the truth. Ino had gone from indignant to pale, her dress a bluish purple. And that is why we are going to change that. I have included 2 genjutsu that are particularly effective in assaulting the senses of another person. And a fire jutsu for you to master for a stronger directed range offensive. Be wise with how you use it though. Asuma sensei is more than capable of teaching you all you need to know. Haruki half expected Ino to begin to wilt under the amount of training materials that he just gave her. To his relief and slight surprise, the Spitfire only seemed to get more resolved. Well, at least her stubbornness is good for something. Shikamaru, similarly to Ino, you have very few options to defend yourself with beyond basic stall tactics and your intellect. In addition to training in your affinity, which is very important, I'll explain why later, I included 2 offensive jutsu and 1 defensive to prepare you for more difficult enemies. You have a great grasp of chakra control, but you are slow to execute it. I can help you with your lightning manipulation. I also want you to seriously consider enrolling in the Fuinjutsu program. You have the analytical mind and the chakra control to find value in it. Though perhaps not the creativity or work ethic, he thought dryly to himself. Kuruma huffed inside his mindscape in amusement. Shikamaru looked like he was about to ask a question, but before he could, the redhead turned, hands in his pockets, to Choji, who was cautiously gripping the large hammer that had come with the scrolls. Choji, the redhead said, turning to the boy who was eyeing the weapon. He chuckled lightly. I see you have found your weapon. Do you like it? Honestly, sensei, I don't really know. I mean, I've never used something like this, and my hand gets bigger than the head of it when I use jutsu anyway, and the genin trailed off, slightly too embarrassed to voice what he was feeling. It was obvious to the adults though. Choza sighed internally. Choji always was very timid at heart. He didn't like violence and tried to avoid conflict where he could. He wasn't a coward and would fight if he had to. He was just a peace-loving boy, which made him worry now that his son was a ninja. Hopeful Choji would grow out of his apprehensions to violence before it cost him something he was unwilling to pay. That's alright, Choji. You could always choose a different weapon, but let me ask you this. If I told you that you could protect your team better if you learned how to use this, would you? Choji nodded after a moment's hesitation. Good answer. The hammer is chakra conductive and can be used to execute jutsu that will affect a large area. I'll show you how during training. Choji, you have the ability to gain a lot of strength because of how much you eat, and I want you to take full advantage of that. The weights that I have included are designed to help you gain mass. In addition, I have included 2 offensive jutsu and 2 defensive jutsu. 1 from each element, in those scrolls. How did you know, sensei? Shikamaru asked, his eyes squinted a little. At the redhead's questioning eyebrow, the Nara clarified, how did you know what affinities we would have? I thought that it was impossible to know for certain without chakra paper, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time any of us have been tested. I would like to know that as well, Inoichi voiced. Haruki shifted his weight slightly but otherwise seemed unperturbed by the question. Just call it a good hunch. That seems a bit convenient for your hunch to guess all 3 genin's affinities perfectly. Inoichi retorted with a slight accusatory edge to his voice. Not counting all the other highly convenient pieces surrounding you. Haruki remained calm but met the gaze of the Yamanaka head as if daring him to defy his claim. My hunches have a tendency for being correct, which is particularly useful in the business of gathering information. Sometimes I'm just that lucky. It was a weak excuse and he knew it, but Haruki didn't want to talk about the real reason for obvious reasons. He hadn't exactly planned for observers, but denying them access would have been even more suspicious. Inoichi stared for another moment and seemed like he was going to push the point before a cough from behind him caught his attention. Without turning to look at the source, the blonde nodded and relaxed his posture slightly. Haruki took the opportunity to segue the genin into their actually training. Thank you, Shikaku, Haruki thought. I should probably come up with a better way of giving them resources for the last group. People are starting to catch on that I might know too much. Quickly, seamlessly making 3 clones, Haruki broke the genin up for their individual training. Alright, each of you come with one of me, and we will get you actual training started. But sensei, what will you be doing? Ino asked curiously. Haruki smirked before pointing his thumb over his shoulder. Training your lazy-ass, sensei, obviously. After that scuffle earlier, it's pretty apparent that Smokestack over here needs some of the rust knocked off him. Asuma went from surprised to slightly offended to a mixture of excited and anxious faster than Ino changed emotions. He would not deny the prospect of sparring with the mysterious redhead was appealing. Both to test himself and clear his head, but also to learn about the redhead and measure his actual skill. Ignoring for the moment the comment about his habit, which was likely petty revenge for making him late anyway, Asuma nodded and stepped on the cigarette he was currently smoking. Considering we have some pretty qualified guests to be proctors and keep us from getting out of hand, I see no harm in that. What are the rules? That is if they are willing. The words had barely left his mouth before Choza agreed. I'll gladly proctor your spar. The Akimichi agreed. We are all curious what Haruki can do anyway. Choza thought. First one to be hit 5 times or yield loses. Taijutsu, ninjutsu and kenjutsu are all that are allowed. Sound good? Haruki asked while tying high hair back. Fine by me. Great, take a minute to warm up while the genin get settled. The redhead then began leading each genin away to a different section of the training ground for their specialized training. Asuma then began stretching while Haruki sat down and closed his eyes as if beginning to meditate. Meanwhile with Shikamaru, one of Haruki's clones leads Shikamaru to the tree line at the other end of the clearing. Well, I think this is far enough for what we are going to be doing. So tell me Shikamaru-kun, what have you been working on since the last time I was here? Mostly what you suggest sensei, as troublesome as it is. I've been trying to make my shadow possession jutsu faster. I have been using leaves as targets by trying to catch as many as possible before they hit the ground. Tu-san has been helping me. Nodding, Haruki put one hand in the kunai pouch and began digging around. That's good, keep doing that. Since your dad is working with you on your shadow, then we will start on your nature transformation. Haruki pulled out a wire sting attached to a light bulb. Before we begin, I want you to know that the lightning element is not only one of the most destructive, but also one of the most dangerous. While fire, if used incorrectly, can get you burned, and wind can get you cut. Lightning, if not channeled properly, can quite literally fry your nervous system and organs. Shikamaru nodded grimly, making a face of apprehension. That being said, lightning is also, in my opinion, at least the second most versatile element of the base 5. What's the first, sensei? Asked the Nara. Wind, Haruki answered quickly. Because of its natural flexibility as a support force and destructive power in combat, these make it the most versatile nature manipulation type. Wind can be used to slice through all kinds of objects, without regards to how strong or durable something is, or be used for blunt force trauma. It can be used to detect enemies or to augment a ninja's sensory range or even the speed of their projectiles. It is viable as a strong defense and offense. And while fire can beat wind due to their opposing natures, allowing fire to feed on it and grow stronger, a skilled wind user can beat just about any other ninjutsu specialist out there. A clang of metal interrupted the redhead's speech and drew his students' attention back to where the team had met. Asuma and the real Haruki were a blur of blades as Asuma tried to weave through the redhead's guard to get in close while at the same time not getting sliced in half. So far Asuma hadn't had much success, and Haruki didn't seem to be trying that hard. Haruki shook his head. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Now the thing about lightning is, like wind, it is more than just an offensive or even defensive element, like fire and water. There are many Raitun jutsus that are supplemental in nature. The best example I can give you is the Raitun no Yoroi, lightning armor, that is used by the Yondaime Reikage, which increases not only one's physical strength, but also increases speed and reflexes by speeding up the neural synapses, increasing their overall physical performance by a magnitude of 4. Haruki smirked slightly as the Nara did the math in his head. He may not have a reference point, but no doubt whatever he imagined as Kage level speed was probably enough. There are many jutsu that can do things similar to this. However, all of these are more advanced than the other jutsu and require an innate understanding, if not total mastery over lightning. Some even affect things externally, like the jutsu I included for you to learn: Raitun, Magyanchiku Jyakyuten, lightning release, magnetic reversal. This just creates a brief electric field around you that will stop most projectiles. A sudden explosion once again caught their attention. Asuma had used his ashfire jutsu on the redhead, and the intense explosion sent a plume of smoke skyward. The smoke cleared to reveal an earth dome. Asuma, however, backflipped away immediately and brought his chakra blades down to strike at nothing. Only for Haruki to burst out of the ground, sword drawn and pointed at the bearded jonin, who deflected the blow and jumped away, the swordsman dashing after him. A snap of Haruki fingers brought Shikamaru's attention back to the clone in front of him. Focus on your own training. Your short-term goal is to get used to using chakra to generate a sark and then hold it. To do that you need to focus chakra into a point and then separate and eject it from that point. This creates a potential difference and causes the change in nature to lightning even if it's nowhere near the strength of actual lightning. This is what the light bulb is for. When you can make this glow with just your chakra, then we will move on to stage 2. He handed the wire and bulb over to Shikamaru, who examined it in his hands. Too little chakra and the bulb won't glow. Too much and the bulb will explode. This can be caused by too much chakra or too strong of a nature change. This is important so that you don't fry your own nervous system when you try and use Raitun Jutsu, and allows you delver more current at higher voltages. Shikamaru just sighed. Well, I had better get started. Sensei is probably not going to last much longer and I need to get in as much practice as I can before we have to take him to the hospital. Haruki chuckled lightly and started him on his first attempt. Shikamaru's prediction was not far off. The jonin continued for about 5 more minutes, which is a long time for jonin, before Haruki managed to pin Asuma with his blade to his neck. The bearded man was good, really good. Asuma was excellent at balancing the spacing between them. He didn't leave openings or overextended himself. He kept just within range to be a threat, keeping up enough pressure to keep Haruki from make the most of his ninjutsu, while also staying out of range to get caught in a taijutsu struggle. Granted, Haruki had been holding back extensively in the range of his abilities, but in the skills he did utilize, Asuma kept pace with him until he miscalculated and mixed up the real one with a Kage Bunshin. Afterward, the two jonin swapped jutsu and pointers with each other in a relaxed fashion. There were no serious injuries, much to Inochi's surprise. He had come to associate the redhead with foolish overboard decisions. Choza, who had proctored the spar, didn't say anything as he just observed the two interact and watched from his seat on a rock. It had not escaped him the few pieces of familiar styles he had seen embedded in the overall fighting style that Haruki used. Especially during the taijutsu portion of their bout. Haruki clearly had his own original style as well as the skill to execute other style of combat that gave him an advantage in a particular moment. However, that didn't explain the influences of the familiar techniques he detected in the young man. He was Guy's sensei after all. I'll have to follow up with Guy and see his relationship to the man. Maybe Shikaku will have an idea. It's apparent that he knows more than he's telling us, though Inochi has yet to notice. Usually that means that whatever it is needs absolute secrecy. If that's the case though, they need to work on deflecting the curious identifiable similarities in our mysterious friend. He sighed internally as Haruki set each genin with their beginning exercises, showing his own boy how to use the war hammer he had been provided, though Shikaku probably knows that already. Not much to do now but wait and watch. Team 10's training session continued for another hour, culminating in all three genin attempting water walking after Ino requested to give the skill a try. Haruki's use of space-time jutsu raised a few eyebrows, however the adults quickly moved on to taking bets on who would fall in the most. It was actually Choji who was having difficulty getting the chakra frequency change fast enough given how exhausted he already was. This was an opportunity for the students to ask about their training and Haruki was happy to answer all their questions. Even if the answer was, "You'll find out later." Shikamaru was the most exasperated, trying to get a plan out of the redhead. And after that? The Nara sighed. So far all Haruki would tell him was that he would be doing the light bulb exercise for the foreseeable future, as long as he was working on chakra control at home. He hadn't even made the light bulb flicker once. Haruki assured him though that he was close. The real test was to maintain the glow after all. Next we will work on your shape transformation, so that you can take full advantage of lightning's piercing nature, Haruki answered the Nara, though what I've given you should last you quite some time. No one spoke as gust of wind blew through the clearing over the space-time lake even as the ripples went the opposite direction. The genin narrowed their eyes at Haruki, who just smiled back innocently. They suspected the wind's presence was his doing to disturb the water and make it hard for them so that they would fall in more. The fact the wind pushed them opposite of the ripples just made it that much more difficult for them. That's just something Haruki would do. Haruki-sensei, why do I have a receipt to Tagarashi's weapon emporium? Shikamaru asked. That is for your own set of chakra blades. That paper is the claim number to go pick them up. Haruki said casually after yawning. They couldn't tell if he was just that tired or the bored, but why those? He pressed. The lack of information was really beginning to frustrate him. Leaning back in his heels, Haruki looked up at the sky and hummed to himself for a moment. Shikamaru, what would say are the weaknesses of the shadow possession jutsu? The Nara grunted as he focused on staying afloat. Well, I need light for there to be shadows to use. It matters the size of the object too. And I have to be still while I use it until it connects. Why did Haruki have to answer a question with a question? This was so troublesome. That seems pretty accurate. In time you will learn to overcome these weaknesses. You're smart enough. In the meantime, having chakra conducting blades will let you literally pin someone's shadow through a projectile for a brief time. As for why they are trench knives, well, there isn't a better weapon for your actual sensei to try and teach you how to use. Shikamaru conceded the point as his mind started trying to factor in what he just learned, looking up at the sky and noting the time the redhead stood from where he was sitting. Alright you guys, that's enough for today. The materials I gave you today along with any training Asuma adds will keep you busy for quite some time. It's important not to overdo it. Your coils need time to recover as much as your bodies do. Turning to Asuma, who was still sitting on the ground slouched forward and arm propped on one knee, the man was clearly tired and trying not to show it. Haruki turned the genin back over to the bearded jonin. Thank you Asuma for the spar. I feel that these three have done enough of my own trading for the day. If he seemed bothered by the trench knives or the loss of the spar, it was masked by his exhaustion. But sensei, we still have energy left. Ino said despite her wobbling legs and furrowed brow. Yeah, we can still going. Choji agreed even though he was panting and soaked to the bone. It was evident on all the adults' face, including Haruki's, that no one expect this reaction from the genin. Haha, well, if you keep going that is certainly your choice, but you'll have to find a different source of water. I am looking forward to the progress you make before we train again. For now though, I am going to go see about my own training. The redhead declared as he ended his jutsu, causing the water to disperse like a puddle in the ground. The genin collapsed on the ground even as the redhead waved to the adults and nodded to Asuma before starting to exit the clearing. Ino quickly made eye contact with her dad, who smiled and nodded, which caused her face to split into a grateful grin. Haruki-sensei, before you go, do you have any plans tonight? She called out as she forced herself to stand to face him. Haruki paused and turned around to look at her with a thoughtful if slightly apprehensive expression. Well, I have lots of work to do at the office, but I'm not sure when my own training is going to end. He didn't get to finish because the blabbermouth blonde couldn't wait any longer. Because I was wondering, or I guess we were, if you would come to the cookout we are having tonight. You know, as a thank you for helping us out so much. We know you don't really have to do it, but it's helped us a lot. She said with her motor mouth searching the redhead's face for any sign of rejection. Shikamaru came to her rescue from his position on the ground. Not that Asuma-sensei is bad. We actually really like him, but having you around has helped us too. So you should come, sensei. Choji's dad is cooking a special barbecue recipe and Ka-san is bringing several side dishes. It would be troublesome if it wasn't all eaten. I am not sure I can, guys. Thanks, though. I don't want to intrude on your gathering. The redhead tried to say despite Ino's crestfallen face. Nonsense, this is a great idea. We have dinners like this frequently and it's just a casual barbecue, nothing big. We'd be happy to have you. Inoichi is hosting this time, so we will be eating at about 6 o'clock at his place. You should make an appearance. Choza interrupted as he approached the group with the fathers in tow. Haruki's expression bounced from one face to the next before landing on Ino's, who had made her eyes big and pleading. The redhead signed and rubbed the back of his head. I never should have taught you that trick. Okay, I'll come, but only if I can contribute in some way. I'll bring a dessert. Sound fair? Ino immediately took a 180-degree change, the dress changing from blue to yellow in an instant. Deal. Asuma-sensei, you should come too. Thank you, Ino, but I actually have plans this evening or I would come. It was the truth, but if he was honest, he needed some time to process with the other jonin in their group about the redhead. Oh, and with who? The genin asked all too innocently while the others had a knowing look on their face. That's not really important. Say, Haruki, what's the title of that book? I kinda want to know what happens next. The bearded jonin deflected to something he was sure would grab everyone's attention. Well, I certainly don't mind it if you read it, but I would like you to find your own answer to my question before you do. It's called The Tale of the Gutsy Ninja and it was written by Jiraiya of the Sannin. His first book actually, and my favorite. Anyway, catch you guys later. And with those parting words to the genin and those gathered, the man disappeared in a burst of wind and leaves. Hours later, an exhausted Kazuma Haruki stumbles into his apartment to shower and change out of his now ruined training attire. He may have gone a bit intense today, but it was necessary. It became apparent quickly that Haruki had not fully recovered from the final battle with Madara, and his sleep and eating habits were likely not helping in that regard. That wasn't to say he wasn't immensely powerful, but if Madara showed up the next morning and he had to fight that same battle over again, it was likely that he wouldn't win, and that thought terrified him. Kurama of course anchored his worrying mind from following every paranoid rabbit trail it thought of. What was most critical besides recovering at the current moment was getting a handle on his new abilities that he never really had time to fully appreciate during the last war. Orochimaru had really outdone himself, that was for sure. Haruki was confident that he was beginning to get a handle on his new ninjutsu skills. He would need them with how many handicaps he now had. As the warm water washed over his tired muscular form, Haruki reflected on his current arsenal and more importantly its limitations. Of my 3 summoning contracts, I can only use 1. Which means I can only use 1 form of Sage Mode. My ninjutsu has expanded, but I can't use the Rasengan or any of its variants until I have met with Jiraiya, and who knows when that will be. I can't risk using Kurama's chakra even once. That cuts out some of my recuperation, speed and sensing capability. I'll need to make up for theses with my new abilities. Haruki thought tiredly. He leaned against the shower wall and closed his eyes, soaking up the heat. No kidding. Bet you'll start appreciating everything I do for you from now on. The fox grumbled. Haruki ignored the jab and turned his attention to the tasks he needed to handle immediately. I will need to create a Kage Bunshin for Sasuke's private lesson tonight. Another to go work at the office. 1 to stay here and prep tomorrow's training for teammate. I need to finalize the changed matrices for the village seal barrier. I still need to do more training, but I just don't have the time. I'll send a clone to the Fuinjutsu test and seminar tomorrow. It's not like there is going to be a high turnout of attendees. The deadline for my assessment is only a couple days away after all. And I still need to get with the old man and Shikaku about planning our next move. The window to strike critical blows to Obito's plan is coming fast, and it won't last long. Haruki cut off the water and dried himself off with a towel while he rolled his eyes internally. He ignored the fox and continued to take inventory of his skills. Until I can use Kurama's chakra again, I am vulnerable to fire, which GG will no doubt use in our match. I need to finish the seal array on my new sword to compensate for this. Thank Kami, my massive reserves allow me to abuse the hell out of Kage Bunshin, or I would be royally screwed. Getting dressed in some casual cloths, Haruki walked into the kitchen where a naked version of himself was putting the finishing touches on a berry custard pie he had made for the occasion. I really need to remember that Kage Bunshin appear wearing whatever I'm wearing when I make them. Not that there is anyone to see this, but still. The clone dispersed and Haruki carefully picked up the dish and made his way out the door, closing it behind him. He would have to hurry if he was going to make it on time. The Yamanaka flower shop was the same as he remembered it, and though it was the home of his biggest critic, Haruki felt strangely calm, even relaxed, as he approached the storefront. The street wasn't particularly crowded, and other than the occasional greeting in passing, most people were minding their own business, mulling about as they prepared for whatever plans their evening held. The Yamanaka clan didn't use a clan compound like the Nara or the Hyuga. And while their homes were spacious, they had more freedom than most other clans in their internal structure. That's not to say it was good or bad, but it was different enough that it mattered to Haruki. Going to a casual cookout at someone's home that wasn't patrolled by guards or required a particular set of rules was far closer to his style. It reminded him of happier times, of what he was fighting for. He ignored the pang in his chest as the fond memories surfaced. The dates he had with Hinata, the gambling nights with the guys, the various birthday celebrations that they had together, the laughter of the villagers celebrating at a festival safety inside the walls of the village. Walls that eventually burned to ash. He thought bitterly. Shaking himself out of that train of thought, it would do no good to reflect on that now. He zoned back just in time to be aware that someone was calling his name. Looking up, he sees the Nara head family approaching from the opposite direction on the road. Shikaku was the inside of the road, carrying multiple paper sacks dressed in casual cloths. He had a small smile on his face and nodded to the redhead in greeting. Opposite of Shikaku was the unmistakable sight of Yoshino Nara, the dark-haired, simple civilian woman that Shikaku married and supposedly the most troublesome woman alive. In many ways Yoshino reminded Haruki of his own mother. Haruki had many interactions with her back in his own time but had yet to be formally introduced in this one. He would have to take extra care to act accordingly if he didn't want to appear any more suspicion. No pressure, right? Thankfully, Shikaku was in the know, so he would be able to help steer conversation in a safe direction. In between both of them was Shikamaru, who was carrying another container of what looked like noodles. He was the one who had called out to him and had even strode faster to reach him. "Haruki-sensei, you made it," the boy said, stopping in front of the redhead with a small side smile. "Seems I did. I am not late, am I?" Haruki replied while scratching the back of his hand nervousness. "Right on time, actually." A cough from behind the young Nara was all the prompting he needed to remember what he was supposed to do. "Haruki-sensei, this is my Ka-san." "Ka-san, this is Haruki-sensei. He's the one that beat Two-san in a game of shogi." The redhead pinched the bridge of his nose as he sighed in exasperation. "You know, I really wish you would stop bringing that up, Shikamaru-kun." The genin shrugged but didn't seem apologetic. Yoshino chuckled lightly at the whiny tone that the redhead took, even as she commented, "I'm sure Shikaku would prefer that as well. My name is Yoshino Nara and you may call me Yoshino, since my son neglected to give you my actual name. I've heard a lot about you, Kazuma-san. Haruki is fine." "Well, I can only hope they are good things, I suppose," he replied, unsure of what to really say. "More vague details than anything. You don't really tell a lot about yourself. You're not a very open person from what I gather," she replied evenly with a hint of amusement in her voice. Taken aback a bit, or at least pretending to be, by the blunt admission, Haruki hesitates to reply but was saved when the door to the shop opened and two people exited to meet them. "Welcome to my house, Haruki-sensei," Ino said in greeting as she came to meet them, Choji just behind her. "Dad is out back grilling the pork now. You're in for a real treat tonight, sensei. What did you bring?" the curious Akimichi greeted before taking a closer looker at the package the redhead carried. Haruki chuckled at his eager look when he saw the dessert he brought. "Still thinking with your stomach? Huh, here you go, Choji. This is a berry custard pie. I made it fresh this afternoon, hopefully it is enjoyable for everyone." Choji looked like he was about to inhale the pie then and there as he examined it closely. "I didn't know you could cook, Haruki. It looks delicious. Perhaps I could get the recipe from you later," Yoshino said, genuinely curious as she examined the pastry. The redhead smiled warmly. "Sure, I don't mind. Well, let's not stand out here all night. We have food to prepare and it was troublesome enough carrying all of this here in the first place." Shikaku huffed. Quickly the others were led in by the Ino, who immediately took Haruki on a tour of the shop. She showed him all the flowers they had on display, deliberately showing him the ones he had her name the first day that they trained together. "So what do you think of him?" Shikaku asked his wife, curious as to her reaction to the redhead's first impression. "So far I like him." "Well, see how the rest of the night goes," she replied after a moment of thought. "Just remember to go easy on him, dear. The man is a guest after all," Shikaku warned. I know. You told me," she said, dismissing his concerns. Shikaku had explained what he could of the situation to her before they came over. Choji and Shikamaru had gone ahead with the food and gone to the back room and down the hall to where the downstairs living area was, before rushing back to find Haruki and Ino. The Nara adults smiled to themselves at the kids' not-so-subtle eagerness to spend time with the jonin. Turning left into the kitchen, they encountered their hosts for the evening. The room was nice and spacious, with a dining area on one side that had a table big enough to seat everyone comfortably, though you could tell that chairs had been pulled from other areas of the house by the mismatch of styles. Over at the store, a woman with brown hair wrapped in a bun and glasses was stirring a boiling pot that smelled incredibly inviting, while Inoichi was washing what looked like lettuce for a salad in the sink. Both were dressed casually and were wearing aprons as they prepared the food. Just behind the table that was set up was a sliding door that was open to a patio area. The aroma of cooked spiced meat drifted through the open airway and filled the kitchen with salivating scents. As the Nara family entered, the woman looked up from the pot. "Oh look, Shikaku and Yoshino are here," she said, walking over to Shikaku. "Here, I'll take those," she said with a smile as she grabbed the bags and began unpacking them and sorting the items that still needed some finishing touches. Shikaku nodded his thanks and relaxed against the counter. Inoichi had finished with the lettuce and walked over to greet his guests. "Glad you both could make it. Any news on our guest of honor? Do you think he will actually come?" If he was honest with himself, he wasn't expecting the man to actually show. Actually, we ran into him just as we were arriving. The kids are taking him on a tour of the inside of the shop. Ino in particular was very eager to show him the flowers you had displayed. Yoshino answered as she unpacked what they brought. Oh well, that good, I must say I am pleasantly surprised. Inoichi said with grin. It wouldn't be that surprising, dear, if you didn't harass the man as much as you do. Came the knowing reply from over his shoulder. Now. There is no need to get into any of that tonight. We invited him here to thank him for the good he has done for our kids. Haruki is a man of his word, and he told Ino he would come. Let's not spoil the evening referencing potential confrontations. The Nara quickly deflected, not wanting his friend's blunders to sour the mood or suffer further embarrassment. You're right as usual. I am sure he will be among in a minute. Hopefully, at least. We may have to go save him from the children. Ino can talk someone to death if she's not careful. Inoichi said, causing the others to laugh. Ha ha ha, I'm sure Choji will keep them on track. He can't resist sampling the dishes we brought anyway. Shikaku countered as he went to pick up dumpling before his hand was slapped with a wooden spoon by his wife. Absolutely not. He'll ruin his appetite, she said, giving him a pointed look while he shook his hand, grumbling. That reminds me, here is the dessert Haruki brought. It's a berry custard pie he made fresh this afternoon. Yoshino placed the container with the other desserts on the counter. Oh well, he didn't have to do that. Himura said. Haruki isn't someone to show up empty-handed. He wouldn't come unless we agreed to let him contribute. He's a prideful man, or at least appears to be. Not that that's a bad thing. Inoichi explained as he began setting the table. Regardless, let's make sure he feels relaxed and welcome tonight, so be on your best behavior, Inoichi. Yoshino said with a wink. Hey! He exclaimed indignantly while the others laughed at his expense. Did we miss the joke? Came a voice from the doorway. All eyes fell upon the red-headed and the kids as they entered the room, smiling with curious expressions on their faces. Not at all. How did you like the tour? Inoichi assured the man as he walked over to greet him, extending his hand. He flashed them a friendly, reassuring grin. It was great, you have a lovely home. Haruki replied warmly, shaking the clan head's hand, though they shared a knowing look. Haruki had been humoring the genin after all. Yeah! Haruki knew so much about the flowers too, san. He could name almost all of them and even knew some stuff about them that I didn't. Can we show Haruki-san the greenhouse? Ino chattered excitedly, even as all adults grinned while continuing to prepare the meal. So long as Haruki is okay with it, I don't mind. Just don't be long, dinner is almost ready. He said with a hidden smirk. Perhaps he was enjoying messing with Haruki a tad too much. Haha, I suppose, we can take a peek. Haruki acquiesced, seeing Ino's pleading expression. He was immediately led through the kitchen before he could really process what was happening. They exited out the door into the backyard to see Choza humming to himself as he cooked a large quantity of meat over a grill. Hearing someone exit the house, the large man turned and smiled at seeing who it was. Welcome, Haruki, I hope you brought your appetite. There is plenty to eat and it should be ready soon. I will certainly try, Choza. Training today was a bit intense, replied the redhead, who stopped out of respect for the man. Well, perhaps you could tell us more about it once we have started eating. I'm sure I am not the only one curious how a man of your talents sharpens his skills. Seeing the curious looks that the genin sent his way, Haruki just shrugged and gave a non-committal answer. Well, we see it's really not that interesting. I think for now they are showing me the greenhouse for the flower shop. Yeah, come on Haruki-sensei, this way. Choji said. If they waited any longer, Ino might explode. And so the jonin was pulled ahead by a very eager blonde with her two genin compatriots tagging along. They had of course been to the house before, but hanging out with Haruki was really the main point. One thing was certain, tonight's dinner was going to be something to remember, Choza thought. It wasn't long before the food was ready and the genin were called to return with Haruki and seat themselves at the table where their paces were prepared. More food had been prepared than was really necessary, although you could never be too careful when planning a meal that involved a kimchi. There was a large selection of dishes that the group was likely to eat. However, no one complained as they quickly gave thanks for the food and dug in. Haruki was particularly thankful for the food. It had been years since he had a kimchi-quality barbecue, and Yoshino was a master of the kitchen. Combined with his intense training regime that day and his lack of proper eating days prior, the redhead consumed multiple helpings of food from almost all of what was provided, to the clear pleasure of everyone at the table for a variety of reasons. Some were happy to see their food appreciated while others were happy to see Haruki act with any amount of healthy life choices. Choza even challenged the man to an eating contest after seeing the man put away his third helping, but Haruki quickly clarified that no man could hope to beat an Akimichi at eating barbecue. Throughout the meal, the members present discussed a variety of topics ranging from favorite pastimes and dishes, to training techniques, to even silly stories from the older Inoshikachos genin days. They laughed and ate together, each person relaxed in a calm environment. Haruki found himself feeling light and full of energy as he laughed to a story Ino told of how Inoichi had mistaken a poison ivy vine for a climbing ivy and sold it to customers for a solid day before figuring out what he had done when they first opened the flower shop, much to the older blonde's embarrassment. Inevitably, however, the curiosity of some people present became too great and Haruki found himself on the receiving end of questions about his own past. "So Haruki-sensei, do you have any cool stories about missions from when you were a genin?" Ino asked. A couple I suppose, but honestly, they're not worth sharing. I'm not even sure I remember all the details right. Haruki said after a moment of thought. "Oh, come on Haruki-sensei. You've got to have something." The blonde insisted. "Well, this wasn't really on a mission, but there was one time during my training when I was a genin that my teammates and me beat our jonin-sensei in a spar." Haruki explained sheepishly with a grin at the memory. "No way, really? How?" Ino asked, excited. "I don't doubt it. Haruki-sensei is really strong." Chuji add. "Haha, actually, I wasn't very talented as a genin. I had a lot of chakra and wasn't very good at controlling it." Haruki admitted, slightly embarrassed, while the genin looked at him skeptically. "Then how did you do it?" Shikamaru asked while Haruki took a drink. "With a book," he answered with an innocent smile, while everyone else, especially the genin, looked at him like he grew a second head. "Ha! What do you mean with a book?" Ino asked the obvious question. "Well, you see, my sensei was a lot like Kakashi-sensei. He read all the time. Shortly before I became a chunin, the Hokage had my team examined by our sensei. We had to capture a flag our sensei was guarding on his person. We fought him from afternoon all through the night and into the next morning, and neither of us could pull it off," he explained. "But what does that have to do with a book?" Yoshino asked, confused. "I'm getting there. See, I had just gifted Sensei with the latest edition of his favorite series and he hadn't had a chance to read it. So, we devised a plan to rush him while yelling out the ending to the book," Haruki said with a smirk. "He was so busy covering his ears and closing his eyes that we managed to nab the flag from him." Everyone in the room deadpanned at the ridiculousness of the story. "Wait, that actually worked?" Shikamaru asked, clearly having trouble believing him. "Hey, it was good plan. It just goes to show you as a ninja to take advantage of any weakness you find," Haruki claimed, a little defensive, though they could tell it was playful. "I don't know, sensei. I think your sensei was just a dumbass," Shikamaru said while shaking his head, making the others laugh except for his mother. "Language, Shikamaru," she warned firmly, though despite her tough exterior you could see the mirth dancing in her eyes. Himura then began gathering the used dishes and tidying the kitchen. Seeing an opportunity now that the dinner was coming to an end and Haruki seemed to be in a far more relaxed state than Inoichi had ever seen him, he coughs to get Ino's attention, signaling her that now would be the time to execute her plan. The children had discussed after Haruki left different ways they could thank him for the thoughtful gifts he had given them. Deciding to get him a gift in return, they were trying to gauge the best time to give it to him. Understanding immediately flooding her eyes, she turns and grabs the two boys. "Excuse me, Haruki-sensei, I meant to show Choji and Shikamaru how I redecorated my room. We'll be right back." And before either boy could really protest, she dragged them out of the kitchen and up the stairs in a blur. Haruki watched them go before turning back to the adults still sitting at the table and arching an eyebrow. Inoichi doesn't meet his glance, standing up to help his wife clean and put things away. Haruki surveys each parent who seemed all too keen on pretending whatever just happened was perfectly normal. Audibly sighing, Haruki decides to address the elephant in the room. "Okay, what's that about?" Pointing over his shoulder with his thumb at the doorway the trio just exited, Shikaku excused himself to the restroom to avoid answering. After another 10 seconds under his cerulean gaze, it was Yoshino who finally broke. "The kids wanted to thank you for the very thoughtful gifts you gave them. Even if it was for training, each of them was very thoughtful and something that they would also enjoy." Haruki groaned as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "That really isn't necessary. It was a reward for their hard work and dedication." Ultimately each of the items is a training tool. Oh, but it was so much more than that to them. Ino was absolutely beside herself when she came home today. She ran in babbling about how amazing her dress was and wanted to show me immediately. When she could change to some colors at will and hold it for a few seconds as she showed me, the smile on her face was true satisfaction. Himura said from the sink. Choji too, he couldn't put the book down even when we got home. He actually fell asleep reading it until it was time to come here. Choza added before Haruki could reply. Besides, it's nothing major, just a memento of appreciation. And it would mean a lot to them. Yoshino added. I suppose there is no getting out of this one then. Haruki said, rubbing the back of his head. Seeing the Jonin still wasn't completely comfortable, Yoshino decided to change the conversation. So Haruki, now that you're back, is there anyone special in your life? The redhead looked up and tilted his head slightly and asked neutrally, what do you mean? Oh come now, there is no reason to be coy. Is there a special lady in your life now that you back? Yoshino said with a wink. Choza however was watching the redhead and noticed subtly signs of tension slowly creeping in the man's posture as she spoke. Before he could interrupt however, the redhead replied, no, I can't say there is at the moment. His voice was neutral and polite, betraying nothing of the tension beneath the surface that Choza could see. He felt a colder than expected breeze rush in from the patio doorway to his back. He thought that would be the end of it, but Yoshino pressed on, frowning. Well, that's a real shame. Young men like you shouldn't dawdle, you know. Life doesn't slow down. You need to get out there and get a good one while you're still young. Everyone needs someone. If you're not careful, you'll end up alone when you're old. And she's interrupted. Himura shouts in surprise. The rune looks at her holding a dish to her chest away from the sink, which had somehow frozen over with a trail of ice up to the faucet. Choza had felt the small chakra flare, a slight leak that burst from the redhead. Before he could decide what to do, their attention is drawn back to the Jonin in question as he stands abruptly, sliding his chair back as he does so. Yoshino-san, thank you for your advice. The life of a shinobi is not an easy one. You never know what is going to happen even during a time of peace. The world is cruel and fighting against that cruelty is one of the burdens shinobi bear, as is embracing that same cruelty. Love, or more accurately, loved ones and the bonds we share with them are what give us the strength to fight. They are the reason we brave the torment that awaits us. Love is our greatest source of strength. Haruki said in a voice just above a whisper, his eyes hollow and distant. He speaks as if to himself, as if he is no longer in the room. And yet, our greatest power is also the most fragile of weaknesses. Despite every effort and power a ninja may possess, what matters most can be taken from them. So then you can imagine what it's like when that happens. And then the reality of the world's harshest paradox sets in, that now you must continue on the fight with the knowledge that the most you have in the end is the memories of a love you failed. The room is silent as the redhead's eyes refocused and gain a dead steel to them, pinning Yoshino. If I told you, it was only going to hurt, if I warned you that the fire's going to burn, would you walk in? Do it all in the name of love? In the darkness? In the middle of the night? In the silence when no one is by your side, what would you do in the name of love? When there's madness? When there's poison in your head? When the sadness leaves you broken in your bed? Who is left to hold you in the depths of your despair? Would you call out in the name of love? And then ask whoever answers the question, is it better to have loved and lost or never loved at all? Anyone who can casually answer that doesn't know the meaning of the word. Haruki-sensei. Came a timid voice from the doorway. The redhead closed his eyes and winced noticeably. He hadn't meant to yell. This wasn't supposed to happen, he knew he meant well. He wasn't really angry with her. In that moment all the emotions he blocked in reference to the past broke through his barriers. He pictured her face, he just started talking and defending himself from an accusation Yoshino hadn't made. The guilt for failing, the hurt at never having what he lost again, the anger for criticizing his detachment, it all boiled over, causing him to justify himself to an unstated accusation. Haruki tried to clear his mind and refused to open his eyes. Yet the darkness of his mind would not shield him from onslaught of images of the dying Nara that flood his mind as soon as he heard those words from the doorway. Why now? I can't let them see me like this. They don't deserve this. I am not going to be around forever. I shouldn't let them get too attached. Haruki thought as his stomach turns, panic rising in his mind. Opening his eyes, He turns toward the door to see the Nara standing in it, clear concern worn on his face. Resolving himself, Haruki strode to the door. I am afraid I have many things I still need to attend to. Thank you for the meal. I'll see myself out, you can keep the pie, consider it compensation for the trouble I caused. Haruki strides past the door even as Shikamaru calls out his name. He can't look at him, not now. Not when all he will see is ghost of the past. He rounds the corner to find the other two standing along the wall. He absently wonders how long they had been there but doesn't break stride to really take note of their faces or what they are carrying. He hears them call for him but only quickens his pace. Shikaka comes out the restroom at the end of the hall. One look at him as he turns left through the door into the shop and Shikaka's face goes from bored to alarmed, immediately. Before he can speak though, Haruki is already gone through the door. He is vaguely aware of rain pelting the glass of the shop's windows. The shop door opens as he is halfway across the shop to reveal a thoroughly soaked Inoichi. He looks up as he shakes his arms to get the water off and blinks confused. Haruki, thank you for your hospitality, but I'm going now. Haruki says quickly as he sidesteps around Inoichi to grab the door, but when he reaches for the handle his body freezes in place. Haruki becomes acutely aware that someone has tried to restrain him and his breath quickens. Keep it together. You will listen. That same voice calls. And now he is angry, irrationally angry. Why couldn't they just let him be? Let me go. He says without looking in a bitter commanding voice. Will you listen? It replied back. That damned hybrid voice. He could hear them both. His past and his present. Let go. He redhead repeats himself this time with more force and grits his teeth. Not until you let Kasan apologies and take Ino's gift. Shikamaru replies with force. Haruki can tell from the corner of his eye that Inoichi is watching off to the side standing at the ready. Sensei just, a burst of chakra and killer intent washes through the room and Shikamaru, who had been straining to hold the redhead, was knocked back on his butt and Inoichi jumped back in front of him to shield him just in case. The force of the chakra shattered the jutsu's hold on the jonin and he looked over his left shoulder, a singed tear starting to escape down his cheek from his stormy blue eye as he whispered, I told you to let me go. And then he was gone. Boom! Thunder crashed overhead as rain continued to fall in a torrential downpour. No one moved in the shop as they stared at the door trying to process what just happened. Ino and Choji were knelt behind Shikamaru trembling. That had been terrifying. Never had they been exposed to such a presence, such a massive turmoil of chakra. A light layer of frost that covered the store began to fade. Inoichi still stood in front of them staring at the door, his expression grim and determined. And then it was like world came crashing back in and they heard yelling from down the hall. I told you not to bring up his past. Came the firm voice of Shikaku. I didn't. He seemed fine. I didn't mean to upset him. It all happened so suddenly. I was just trying to distract him from the kid's presence since he seemed uncomfortable with it. Yoshino yelled back defensively. Is everyone okay? Inoichi asked with calm if serious voice, finally looking away from the door and taking in the appearance of the genin on the floor. I think so, Choji answered, a slight tremor in his voice. That was pretty ballsy, Shikamaru. I wouldn't recommend trying that again. The Yamanaka clan head said, extending a hand to help the boy stand. This seemed to snap the Nara out of this stupor. His eye narrowed immediately and he stood up on his own, spun on his heel and stomped back towards the kitchen. Chuji scrambled up to follow hot on his heels. Inoichi turned finally to his own daughter that bent down to pick up the pieces of a vase she had been carrying. It was a special vase that had the clan insignia of each member of the Inoshikacho and was signed by the genin of Team 10. Ino had been holding it when they followed Haruki into the storefront, but in her shock at being exposed to the chakra and killer intent of the redhead, she had unknowingly dropped it and it had shattered. She sniffed slightly as she picked up the pieces slowly. Inoichi sighed and went to comfort his daughter. I am sorry, Ino. You shouldn't have been exposed to that. It was irresponsible of Kazama-san to react. What happened to San? Ino interrupted him, causing him to blink in surprise. What happened to make Haruki-sensei carry so much sadness? Why can't you help him? She said in a broken voice as tears finally began to fall. Oh, Ino. It's complicated, and I honestly don't know what the full story is. He said, eyes softening as he pulled his daughter into a wet hug, her warm tears landing on his chest. You should have heard him, Daddy. He was so hurt and angry. He couldn't even look at us. She said as she cried. Promise me you'll try to help him. I promise, Inoichi whispered as he rubbed her back, but if he was honest with himself, he didn't know what to do. He needed to find out why the man had snapped. Shikaku had told him that there was a good reason Haruki was hurting after training that morning. He insisted he didn't have all the details yet and they were going to discuss some of it later. If this was an indication of the man's psyche, then he definitely shouldn't be active duty. Meanwhile, a much more aggressive parent-child confrontation was taking place. How dare you! Shikamaru shouted as he rounded the corner, glaring at his mother standing by the counter packing food, hastily arguing with his dad who was rubbing his forehead. Choza and Himura were busy trying to unfreeze the sink but stopped when Shikamaru stormed into the kitchen, as did Yoshino. Yoshino narrowed her eyes as she faced her son. Excuse me. No, I will not. He cuts her off, flinging his arm across his body. How could you do that to him? Dad warned you. He told you that Haruki-sensei had no one, that the whole point of this was to help him reconnect with the village after being gone so long. At seeing their surprised expressions, Shikamaru answered the unasked question. I overheard Tosan and you talking. He clearly told you sensei was recovering from a long mission that had hurt him and to avoid saying anything that would trigger him. He told you he lost a lot. Shikaku tries to step in. Shikamaru, she had no way of knowing. But Shikamaru cut him off. Yes, she did. Kasan isn't dumb. Asking sensei about his love life would obviously bring back memories. It's a shinobi's responsibility to control their emotions, even allowing for whatever misfortune befell him. What I said shouldn't have resulted in such an acute reaction. Yoshino responded coldly, staring into her son's eyes as he gritted his teeth. How can you say that? You threw his loneliness in his face. It was inconsiderate. You're not a shinobi, how could you possibly understand what he's gone through? You just didn't care. You're just a housewife that nags about everything she doesn't like. Smack! The ranting Nara's eyes widen in surprise as he felt the sting on his cheek. He gently raises his hand to touch his pulsating cheek before slowly turning to stare at his mother who was staring straight into his eyes. Shikamaru Hiroshi Nara, you are a brilliant boy and you can be right about a lot of things, but I am your mother and you will not speak to me that way. She said in a firm but calm voice. I regret my error in talking with Haruki-san. I did not expect his reaction and that is my fault. I have been very blessed that the Shinigami hasn't taken anyone in my immediate family yet, but I have had countless friends pass on before their time. I have to worry about your father and now you every day. Every time you leave our home. I have to trust in the village that it will guard and protect you, that your sensei will train you properly and hope that the fragile peace that we have now is not broken to satisfy one man's greed. I pray to Kami that the price to maintain that peace won't require my son's blood. So, I understand that kind of lose. I can fathom the pain he is experiencing, at least in part. I am very thankful for Haruki's influence on you, and you must know I meant no insult or harm to him. He is a strong man and cares for you. My foolish mistake will not change this. Shikamaru averts his eyes, still holding his cheek as he hangs his head in shame. She was right, of course, but you're not the one that he can't bear to look at. He whispers in a small voice, looking at the floor. He is then enveloped in a hug by Yoshino. I know it hurts. But it's not your fault. Nor is it Haruki's. This world we live in is not perfect and sometimes scars on our hearts tear open. The wounds he has suffered must be numerous and deep. Many may be fresh, we have no way of knowing. Time and kindness are the only things that can help now. So, we need to be strong for Haruki-sensei so that when the shadows come and they block you from his eyes you can still be there for him. Right? Right. He says, sniffing. I'm sorry, Kasan. It's okay, my love. She says, smiling, now help me pack up, hopefully the rain will start to clear out. Now that everyone was calming down, they worked together to finish cleaning up. Choji was silent the whole time. Eventually the rain passed and Yoshino left with Shikamaru and took Choji with them. He would stay over with the Naras for the night. Himura made sure Ino went to bed after such an eventful day, leaving the three men in the kitchen to discuss what to do about Haruki well into the night. Death was commonplace in the shinobi world, and while it was never easy, such a reaction indicated a deeper trauma than mere loss. This was major evidence that the man wasn't stable, and the three argued about how this would affect his coming mission. In the end, they didn't come to a consensus but agreed to keep doing what they had in the meantime. It was likely that Haruki would lie low for a while around them. It was important to treat him no different so that he would come back on his own. Chasing him would just cause him to run more. With heavy hearts and tired minds, the trio parted ways to get some much-needed rest. That's it for part 11. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.